The Hulk is one of the most iconic Avengers of all time. He's on the posters, he's in the movies, he's the guy people think of when you say Avengers. He quit the team in the second issue, so today we're going through every single Avenger who has ever held a membership card, starting with the ones who kicked this whole mess off.
The Founders.
In September 1963, Stan Lee and Jack Kirby launched the Avengers #1 with 5 heroes: Iron Man, Ant-Man, Thor, the Hulk, and the Wasp. The whole thing was Marvel's counterpunch to DC's Justice League. Oh, you've got a super team. Cool. Ours argues more, and argue they did. The Hulk bounced by issue 2, accidentally inventing the revolving door roster that would define this team for 6 decades. Then in issue 4, they found Captain America frozen in ice and basically said, yeah, he was always a founder. He literally was not in the first issue, but sure, retroactive founding member status. Nobody questioned it because it's Captain America. This early era gave us Avengers Mansion, formal membership protocols, and the Earth's Mightiest Heroes label. 5 heroes, 1 mansion, 0 stability. But if you think the original lineup was chaotic, wait until Cap got stuck leading a team of reformed criminals. Cap's kooky quartet. So the original heavy hitters all leave. Iron Man, Giant Man, the Wasp, gone. And who does Marvel's premier super team get as replacements? 3 criminals and a guy who'd been frozen since World War II. That's not an exaggeration. Hawkeye, Scarlet Witch, and Quicksilver had all debuted as straight-up villains. Captain America was leading a team where literally every other member had tried to kill heroes at some point, which is, not ideal for a trust-building exercise. And they did not get along. Issues 16 through 27 are 11 issues of near-constant bickering and passive-aggressive nonsense. Hawkeye challenged Cap's authority roughly every other panel. Quicksilver thought he was better than everyone. Scarlet Witch was stuck mediating between her brother and a guy who wouldn't stop yelling about his bow. But here's the thing, it worked. This scrappy, underpowered, argumentative mess proved you didn't need a Norse god or a billionaire in a metal suit to sell an Avengers book. You just needed characters people actually cared about arguing in entertaining ways. The Avengers had proven they could survive on chemistry alone, and that chemistry is about to get a whole lot more complicated once the 1970s show up. The 1970s mainstays. Here's something wild. Only 10 new members joined the Avengers across the entire 1970s. 10 in a full decade. And honestly, that restraint is what made the era work. Every new addition actually had room to breathe and develop instead of getting lost in a crowd. Mantis arrived in 1973 in issue 114 and quietly became one of the decade's best character arcs. Beast joined in 1976 after his transformation into a big blue furry monster during the X-Men hiatus, alongside Moondragon in the same issue. Swordsman, Hellcat, Wonder Man, and Black Widow, who was formalized as a full member in issue 111, all rounded out the roster. Each one got actual page time. What a concept! But the real long gameplay was the Falcon. Sam Wilson officially joined in Avengers 184 in 1979 as an on-again, off-again member, and nobody at the time could have predicted that this guy would eventually pick up the Captain America shield decades later. The 1970s didn't know it, but it was planting seeds for some of the biggest moments in Marvel history, which is a lot of careful, measured roster building. So naturally, the 1980s said, what if we just made a whole second team on the other side of the country? West Coast Avengers. This is the team that proved the Avengers could franchise themselves like a fast food chain. In September 1984, Roger Stern and Bob Hall launched the first ever Avengers spin-off after Vision suggested the team needed to expand beyond the East Coast. So Hawkeye, fresh off marrying Mockingbird, recruited her along with Wonder Man, Tigra, and Iron Man. Except here's the thing, that wasn't Tony Stark in the armor, it was Jim Rhodes, and nobody on the team knew. Their own Iron Man was a completely different person, and they just didn't notice. Which is, not ideal for a group of Earth's mightiest heroes. The team proved it could hold its own by taking down Graviton, and suddenly the concept of regional Avengers branches wasn't just viable, it was permanent. This was the proof of concept that the brand could split itself geographically and still work. And then, in 2018, both Clint Barton and Kate Bishop decided to revive the whole thing after a land shark attack in Santa Monica. Land shark. sharks. That's the inciting incident. They recruited America Chavez, eventually brought in Gwenpool and Quentin Quire, and the West Coast was back in business. Because apparently, all you need to restart a legendary superhero franchise is a shark with legs. But if the 80s gave us geographic expansion, the 90s gave us something far more dangerous. Leather jackets on everyone. The 90s leather jacket era. The 1990s hit the Avengers like a truck full of shoulder pads and bad attitude. Every new recruit from this era looked like they walked straight out of a music video nobody asked for. Stingray joined in 1990 with an underwater exoskeleton suit, because apparently what the Avengers really needed was a guy who fights best in the ocean, on land with the rest of the team doing land things. Cool. Then there's Rage, who showed up in 1991 with possibly the most hilarious power mechanic in Avengers history. The harder you hit him, the stronger he gets. Every punch makes the problem worse. Nobody ever stops hitting him. Sandman, a literal Spider-Man villain, got reformed and handed an Avengers membership card. Machine Man joined the same year, basically HAL 9000 stuffed into a human-shaped body, who later absorbed Sentinel nanotechnology, because that's just a thing you could do in the 90s. Darkhawk showed up in 1993, controlled his android body through an amulet, and somehow juggled membership across 3 teams simultaneously. Circe, an Eternal who'd been living among humans longer than any other member of her race, joined in 1990, decades before the MCU made anyone care about Eternals. And then there's Spider-Man, the most popular superhero on the planet, joined in 1991 as a reserve member. A reserve. The guy who would eventually become the face of the entire franchise got handed a participation trophy and told to wait by the phone. But if the 90s were chaotic, what came next actually tried to fix things. Heroes return. Nobody talks about this era, and honestly, that's kind of the point. Avengers Volume 3 launched in February 1998 and ran for 89 issues, quietly doing the most thankless job in comics, making the Avengers functional again. After the scattered, leather-clad chaos of the 90s, this run went back to basics. Large-scale threats, stable rosters, an actual team hierarchy where people showed up to meetings and didn't immediately betray each other. Revolutionary stuff, apparently. Black Panther had been a full Avengers member since 1968 and even served as chairperson, but this era gave him renewed prominence on the roster, not as a nostalgic callback, but as a legitimate heavy hitter operating alongside Black Widow, Black Knight, Falcon, Beast, and Captain America. T'Challa went from guy who drifted in and out for decades to consistent core presence again, which is quietly one of the most important recalibrations in modern Avengers history. But here's the irony that makes this whole era kinda tragic. The run's greatest achievement was rebuilding the Avengers into something stable, coherent, and meaningful enough that destroying it would actually hurt. And that's exactly what happened. Avengers Disassembled tore down every single thing this era constructed, and it only worked because this era made you care again. 6 years of careful rebuilding, specifically so the explosion would be louder, which is, you know, not ideal. But the team that rose from those ashes, that's a whole different animal. New Avengers. In November 2004, Brian Michael Bendis did something that should have gotten him fired. He took the Avengers, one of the most iconic teams in comic book history, and he blew them up. Avengers Disassembled ran through issues 500 to 503, and by the time the dust settled, the mansion was wrecked. The team was done. And then, 1 month later, he rebuilt it with a lineup that made absolutely zero sense on paper. New Avengers #1 launched in December 2004 with Captain America, Luke Cage, Iron Man, Spider-Man, and Spider-Woman, street-level heroes standing next to billionaires. When people questioned whether this ragtag group even counted as Avengers, Bendis had the perfect answer. They're Avengers because Captain America said they were. That's it. That's the criteria. The team expanded to include Wolverine, the Sentry, and Echo. But here's where it gets weird. Spider-Woman, one of the founding members, wasn't actually Spider-Woman. She was a Skrull impersonator named Varanki who had been infiltrating the team from day one. That reveal retroactively made every interaction she'd had feel deeply unsettling. After Steve Rogers' apparent death, Bucky Barnes stepped in as Captain America, but the real character moment came later. When Rogers returned after the siege of Asgard, he handed Luke Cage a $1 to buy Avengers Mansion and gave him full authority to run the team. Luke Cage, a guy who started as a street-level hero for hire, now leading the Avengers out of a mansion he bought for $1. But if you think Bendis was done creating Avengers teams, wait until you see the one Tony Stark built to compete with them, the Mighty Avengers. So after Civil War tore the superhero community in half, Marvel did something genuinely interesting with the wreckage. They split the Avengers into two teams running simultaneously, each with a completely different vibe. The Mighty Avengers were the public-facing squad, the big guns, the team you'd see on the news saving Manhattan from whatever cosmic nightmare showed up that Iron Man, Ms. Marvel, Wasp, Black Widow, Wonder Man, the Sentry, and because apparently someone at Marvel woke up one day and said, you know what this team needs? The literal Greek god of war, Ares. Ares on an Avengers roster is inherently entertaining. This is a guy whose solution to every problem is violence, sitting in strategy meetings with Tony Stark. Beautiful. The lineup was designed for one thing, raw power concentration. Every member hit like a freight train, and the team operated as the officially sanctioned, government-approved Avengers, while the new Avengers ran around in the shadows doing the actual interesting character work. It was spectacle versus substance, and Marvel committed to running both books at the same time. The series ran from 2007 to 2010, and while it never quite matched the new Avengers in fan devotion, it served its purpose. This was the first time Marvel seriously committed to the idea that Avengers wasn't one team anymore. It was a brand, multiple squads, multiple philosophies, one name, which is a nice concept, until someone decides to fill that brand entirely with supervillains, the Dark Avengers. So Norman Osborn, the Green Goblin, a man who literally dresses up as a goblin and throws pumpkin bombs at people, somehow parlayed his role in stopping the Skrull invasion into a government appointment. He disbanded SHIELD, created his own organization called Hammer, and then in 2009 assembled his very own Avengers team, which sounds fine until you realize every single member was either a villain or a villain wearing a hero's Halloween costume. Mac Gargan, better known as Venom, posed as Spider-Man. Daken, Wolverine's murderous son, wore his dad's costume, and Bullseye, an actual serial killer, disguised himself as Hawkeye. A serial killer pretending to be the guy who never misses, which is, not ideal. Osborn himself slapped on a red, white, and blue Iron Man suit, called himself the Iron Patriot, and held press conferences with a straight face. Later iterations added Scar, Gorgon, and a rebuilt Ragnarok cyborg to serve as a fake Thor, all backed by Hydra and AIM. The entire premise was a lie. Villains wearing heroes' costumes, using government authority to make themselves look legitimate. It's the Avengers if every member was committing identity fraud simultaneously. And it worked for a while, until Osborn's inevitable capture and incarceration in issue 16 brought the whole charade crashing down. Turns out a team built entirely on deception doesn't have great long-term stability. Add that to the list. But if the Dark Avengers were the loud, public corruption of the Avengers name, the next team was the exact opposite. Secret Avengers. In 2010, Steve Rogers looked at the Avengers franchise and said, you know what this needs? Less punching and more espionage. And honestly, he was right. The Secret Avengers launched during Marvel's heroic age as a covert ops squad built for missions the public Avengers could never be seen doing. No press conferences, no parades, no giant robots crashing through Manhattan. Just black ops in the darkest corners of the globe. Think less Earth's mightiest heroes and more Earth's sneakiest heroes. But here's where it gets interesting. The roster paired Black Widow, one of the most accomplished spies in Marvel history, with Valkyrie, an Asgardian warrior goddess, doing espionage. Picture a literal mythological demigod trying to blend in on a stealth mission. It's like bringing a flaming sword to a lockpicking class, and their very first mission, stealing the Serpent Crown from Roxxon Corporation. Not fighting an alien invasion, not stopping a supervillain monologue, a corporate heist. The crown turned out to have unexpected cosmic origins, which added layers to what could have been a straightforward theft, but the point is that Marvel proved the Avengers brand could carry a spy thriller. No capes required. The whole thing worked because it asked a question nobody thought to ask. What happens when you take the Avengers formula and strip out everything loud about it? Turns out, you get something genuinely compelling. But if covert ops pushed the franchise in a new direction, the next team pushed it somewhere even weirder. A classroom. Avengers Academy. Here's a fun question. If you needed someone to mentor troubled, superpowered teenagers, would you pick the guy who created Ultron, had a nervous breakdown, and is generally considered one of the most personally disastrous Avengers in history because Marvel did? Avengers Academy ran for 39 issues from 2010 to 2012. The premise was simple. Take a bunch of superpowered kids who were less future heroes and more future problems, put them in a structured environment with veteran Avengers as instructors, and hope for the best. The headmaster, Hank Pym, a founding Avenger who had been, at various points, a scientist, a hero, a disgrace, and a court-martialed embarrassment, which is, not ideal for a school brochure, but that's what made it work. Pym wasn't chosen because he had a clean record. He was chosen because he understood what it meant to be powerful and fundamentally broken at the same time. These kids didn't need a flawless role model. They needed someone who'd already hit rock bottom and clawed his way back. The bigger implication is what the Academy said about the Avengers as an organization. For decades, the team was purely reactive. Threat shows up, punch threat, go home. But building a school? That's long-term thinking. The Avengers had finally become stable enough to invest in the future instead of just surviving the present. But if you think structured mentorship sounds wholesome, the next team was built to handle something far messier. The fallout of mutants and Avengers trying to kill each other. Uncanny Avengers. Captain America looked at the smoldering aftermath of Avengers vs. X-Men in 2012 and had what might be the most politically ambitious idea in Marvel history. Instead of letting mutants and humans keep punching each other into oblivion, he decided to force them onto the same team. Just shove everyone into a room and make them cooperate, which is, not ideal as a conflict resolution strategy, but Steve Rogers has never been accused of thinking small. Rick Remender and John Cassaday launched the Uncanny Avengers in December 2012, with a roster that reads like a deliberate provocation. Captain America, Thor, Wolverine, Rogue, and Scarlet Witch, the woman who nearly wiped out the entire mutant race, sitting across the table from X-Men who lost everything because of her. That's not a team, that's a hostage negotiation. But here's the thing, the Unity Squad wasn't a one-time experiment. It kept coming back. In 2015, the team was revived specifically to deal with the Terrigen Mist crisis that was literally killing mutants just for existing, expanding the cooperation mandate to include Inhumans. Then in 2023, a new version assembled Captain America alongside Deadpool, Quicksilver, Psylocke, and Penance. Every single relaunch exists because the problem the team was built to solve never actually gets solved. Mutants and humans keep finding new reasons to distrust each other, and Marvel keeps reassembling this team like a desperate couples therapist who refuses to give up. But if you think forcing enemies onto one team is ambitious, wait until the Avengers decide to go global, like the entire planet global. Avengers World. So for about 50 years, the Avengers were basically a group of friends who punched things together. Sometimes 5 friends, sometimes 20, but always friends. Jonathan Hickman looked at that model and said, what if we made this a corporation? Starting in January 2014, Hickman's Avengers World Run transformed the team from a superhero squad into a full-blown global institution. Captain America spearheaded the expansion, deploying resources across multiple continents, establishing regional branches, and extending Avengers' authority into interplanetary territory. The Avengers didn't just go big, they went multinational, and this wasn't a side effect of some storyline. This was the actual premise. The tagline was literally about the Avengers expanding their roster and sphere of influence to a planetary scale. They had divisions, they had specialized units, they had coordinated command structures. 5 guys in a mansion? This was not. The title ran alongside New Avengers and Mighty Avengers as part of Marvel's third Now wave, each book serving a completely different strategic purpose within the broader Avengers ecosystem. Less like reading a comic, more like reviewing an org chart. Hickman essentially asked the question nobody had thought to ask. What happens when Earth's mightiest heroes stop being a team and start being an institution? Turns out, you get something that looks less like the Justice League and more like the United Nations with capes, which is, a choice. But if Hickman's era was about going impossibly big, the next chapter was about stripping everything back down. All new, all different Avengers. November 2015, Marvel drops a $4.99 debut issue, rated T+, written by Mark Waid and drawn by Adam Kubert, and basically says, this is the future of the Avengers, deal with it. Because the roster wasn't a slight tweak, it was a statement. Sam Wilson was Captain America. Not filling in, not temporary. The guy was carrying the shield as the real real deal. Miles Morales was Spider-Man, not Peter Parker, a teenager from a completely different universe. Tony Stark was still Iron Man, sure, but he was surrounded by heroes who weren't the ones audiences grew up reading about. They were the next generation wearing the same costumes, and the originals were still out there somewhere, which made the whole thing feel like Marvel was daring you to accept it. And here's the thing. That tension is exactly what made it work. The entire premise forced a question comic fans had been arguing about for decades. Can someone else legitimately carry a mantle that doesn't belong to them? Marvel's answer was a $4.99 bet that yes, they absolutely can. The series came out of the ashes of Secret Wars, and it wasn't just a new team. It was proof of concept. Could a flagship Avengers title survive with a roster built around legacy heroes? Could Sam Wilson and Miles Morales carry the same brand that Thor and Steve Rogers built? The answer turned out to be yes, which is, kind of a big deal. But if you think legacy heroes shook things up, wait until you see what the current roster looks like. The current prime roster. Writer Jed McKay took the reins in 2023 and decided to do something nobody asked for, but everybody needed. He built the largest modern roster the Avengers have fielded in years. Black Panther, Captain Marvel, Steve Rogers, Sam Wilson, Hazmat, Kate Bishop, Hercules, Iron Man, Quicksilver, Scarlet Witch, Storm, Thor, Vision, and, because apparently 14 superheroes wasn't enough, a sentient city called Impossible City. That's right, a location is on the team, not a person who lives in a city. The city itself. It has membership status. I don't know what to tell you, but here's what makes McKay's run genuinely interesting. There's no single leader. Leadership rotates between Black Panther, Captain Marvel, Storm, and Sam Wilson, depending on the mission. One fight needs a tactician, you get T'Challa. Next one needs raw cosmic firepower, Carol's in the chair. It's a deliberate rejection of the one guy gives the speeches model that defined the team for 60 years. McKay treats this roster like a high-functioning tactical unit where every member feels essential, not a hierarchy where 3 people matter, and everyone else stands in the background looking concerned. His run wraps up March 4th, 2026. And with Avengers, Doomsday hitting theaters that same year and Secret Wars following in 2027, the next reinvention is already being shaped before the current one even finishes cooling. That's the thing about the Avengers. They started as 5 guys arguing in a mansion in 1963. Now they're a rotating leadership tactical institution with a sentient city on the payroll. The roster never stops changing. It was never supposed to. That is the point. If you enjoyed this video and want to see more, click the video on the screen now.